We still have people joining us, but hello, everybody. This is so exciting. We have people from all over joining us today for World Taste and Smell Day. World Taste and Smell Day is meant to be a global day of awareness, a day dedicated to appreciating our senses of taste and smell. I'm Stephanie Foyer, and I head the World Taste and Smell Association, along with my colleagues Michelle Niedziela, who will be moderating our panel discussion on the wonders of taste and smell, Mandy Yang, Valentina Parma, and Jennifer Trackman. Our mission is threefold. First, to celebrate the power of taste and smell and all they do to enhance our lives. Second, we want to support the innovators and creators and the researchers and renegades working to deepen our understanding of taste and smell. And we intend to roll out some initiatives to do just that. And third, and most personal, support people living with taste or smell dysfunctions. I'm one of those people. I lost my sense of smell after a virus in 2017, well before COVID. I miss the smell of coffee, the scent of the spice bread I make, the smell of rain. I was jealous of how my shaggy dog twitched his nose in pleasure and the popcorn smell of his paws. I miss the smell of sex. And no one got it. They said it was all in my head or not so bad, or I couldn't smell farts or the New York City garbage. So why was it so bad? Some people didn't think it was real. A coworker shoved her salad topped with blue cheese under my nose and said, "Surely you could smell this." Nope. And it's a suffering you really don't understand until it happens to you. How you're cut off from the world, how you feel like you're on the wrong side of two-way glass, quarantined from your life. And everything tastes like paste. Or in the case of parosmia, it's all foul and alien. Smell and taste loss impact your health, your ability to detect danger, to pick up on social cues, and feel connected with your world. I've got to give a shout out to Absent and Fifth Sense and the online support groups. They got me through my suffering, and now they're Stana too. 5 years in, I've regained some of my sense of smell and much of my sense of taste. It's not the same. I'm not the same. The chemosenses, taste and smell, are our most ancient senses, and their role is fundamental to who we are and what makes us human. Today, today we recognize taste and smell and all their value. And now 15 million people in the world are expected to have to live without taste and smell because of COVID. 15 million. And millions were already suffering from smell or taste loss because of brain injury or chemotherapy or other illnesses or genetics. Today in China and in the Philippines, in conjunction with Taste and Smell Day, there are events and symposia for patients and medical professionals focused on smell loss. We're celebrating too, with perfume and cocktail events in New York and Los Angeles and Detroit, and in more personal ways, by taking a moment to appreciate how taste and smell enhance our lives. I'd like to extend some gratitude to our sponsors of World Taste and Smell Day. Takasago International Corporation is a major international producer of fragrances and flavors, and they've supported us from the very beginning, as has Perfumery and HCD Research. And this year, we're most appreciative of support from the Salon Project, Equinox Cafe, Safumatu Fragrances, and Fannie Mae Chocolates. And all of you for being here, for spreading the word. We're a growing organization, and at the end of the webcast, we'll talk to you about how you can get more involved. Today, we're going to hear in a bit about the wonders and taste of smell from experts from a variety of fields. But first, we often say that taste and smell are our neglected senses. But what do we really know about our perception of these senses? I'm thrilled that we have two very special guests on hand to discuss that and to tell you about a new survey. Rachel Herz, who many of you may know, a professor at Brown, and Martha Bajek from Boston College will now talk about their work on the perception of smell and taste.
Hi, my name is Michelle Niedziela, and I'm going to be helping carry you through this discussion with Rachel and with Martha. We're having some issues getting Martha onto the webinar, but she will be joining us shortly as well. We would love you to be able to chat with us as we are doing this web event. And so please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat if you have any questions or any comments. But I do want to launch right into speaking with Dr. Herz, Rachel, who, if you could describe yourself and your expertise and what you are doing these days, and also let us know a little bit about how you found your interest in this area of taste and smell and why it's so important to you, and what sort of led you into the curiosity of wanting to understand better how we value our taste and smell and the perceptions of taste and smell. So Rachel, please.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. And I know we don't have all day, so your question has a potentially long answer, but I'll try to jump to the chase. And so basically, I have been working in the area of smell. I'm a neuroscientist, psychological science of smell in particular, and I've been working in this area for over 30 years now. And I started my undergraduate degree in biology. That's my basic background, and evolutionary biology in particular. So as well as learning theory, and both of those things have really formed and informed the way that I think about how the sense of smell works, how we respond to it, and so on. Now, what was interesting, and this I guess began while I was a graduate student, is that nobody cared about the sense of smell at all. In fact, I was cautioned by various professors in the department that I was in at the University of Toronto that I was never going to get a job, because if you want to study the senses, really the only thing to study was vision. And, if you have to do something else, maybe hearing, but definitely who cares about the sense of smell? And, it's just a losing avenue of research and everything else. So I think I've proved them wrong, more or less, but still, this has been a very long road to hoe. And it's just, an uphill battle constantly, as I think everyone on this webinar can appreciate. And one of the things that got me interested in what we're going to be talking a little bit about today is that there's basically no research that really shows how little people pay to their sense of smell, how little attention, how little care they have. It's often referred to as the orphan of the senses. Everyone, if you sort of casually ask people, they'll, land on the sense of smell as being the least important if they have to rank it. Also, the American Medical Association only places the value of your life's worth if you're in some kind of a lawsuit where you want compensation as if you lose the sense of smell, it's between 1% or 5% of your life's value, versus if you lose vision, it's 85%. So that gives you like this obvious comparison. And so there's that as a sort of a starting point, but especially with the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that so much media attention, there's a New York Times article, and basically around the globe, interest in the sense of smell spiked so much in terms of Google searches that it could actually be used as a predictive diagnostic for the amount of COVID-19 that was happening. So just by looking at smell loss or related terms, you could actually see hotspots of where COVID was happening. So as a function of this sort of massive increase in awareness and attention and realization of the quality of life dysfunction that occurs with smell loss, I thought, okay, perfect time to see how do people actually value their sense of smell in comparison. And what I looked at specifically with Martha, hopefully she'll get on in a second, is smell in comparison to vision and hearing. And we wanted to compare both the senses to each other, as well as to various what we call commodities, common things in life that we have. And we vary those commodities from personal items. So I guess, hair was one of them. So is your little left toe. And the reason why we included this is in 1999, Amy Resniewski and Paul Rosen did a survey study where they were looking at the importance of scent in daily life. And they found, just based on one question that didn't really have anything to do with the senses, comparatively, other than this one question, that people ranked losing their sense of smell completely as equivalent to losing their little left toe. So that was why we included that. But we also included things like your cell phone, $10,000, your favorite streaming service, a dream vacation, sort of much more sort of general life, personal commodities. And some of the amazing things that we found, well, first of all, we also had two groups of people, one college students, classic psychological guinea pig. So the average age of 22, as well as real life adults whose average age was about 48. And we had about 200 plus in each group. And we thought that there would maybe be some differences in terms of the value of the sense of smell compared to the two groups. And yes, it was the case that the older people, the adults, had some awareness of the sense of smell being somewhat more important. So they did rate the sense of smell as more important than the younger students did. However, overall, in terms of willingness to lose a sense, vision, hearing, smell, 85% of people chose to lose their sense of smell compared to the other senses. And as you can imagine, vision, only about 1% of people were willing to give up to keep the other two senses. Then when we look at things like comparing to the commodities, this is where I really was blown away. So losing your cell phone or completely losing your sense of smell, for college students, 25% of college students would rather lose their sense of smell than their cell phone. Another thing that was really interesting was among women. So we looked at the comparison between men and women in terms of their responses to these various items. And for women, losing their hair, 50 compared to the senses, 50% of people would rather lose their sense of smell than their hair. The number was lower among men. And of course, compared to vision and hearing, it was very low as a comparison rate. So we have all kinds of really interesting data from this that really kind of blew our mind. And one of the things that we're doing with World Taste and Smell Day is we've actually developed a new survey that you can get to. And I think that a link to it is going to be posted in the chat, and you can find it also on the website, that we've now incorporated taste, of course, as well as touch. So we're including all 5 senses. And this is actually going to be a global survey translated into 5 other languages besides English, available across the whole entire world, so that we can really sort of mine these questions even further and look at how differences in culture and country and life experience across a much more broad spectrum influence these findings. So it's very exciting. It's still kind of disheartening, though. Smell is so little regarded across the board, even with COVID-19 bringing awareness to it.
Thank you so much. I think that's really interesting. And Martha, you've been able to join us, so I want to make sure that we give you an opportunity to speak your thoughts as well about what interested you so much in studying this.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Rachel did obviously a fantastic job explaining overall everything that we did and what we found. And it was very interesting and very unexpected for me, especially the hair and pet were surprising. And I don't know why, because once I thought about it more, it made really good sense that those are the 2 things that we would really try to hold on to out of all of the items asked. So that was a big surprise for me. But I came into this from a background in taste and smell, but a real interest in sort of the neuroscience and psychology of how we think of these things and how we compare them to what we have around us in our everyday lives.
That's really wonderful. And I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to also participate in the survey. We are collecting data right now. We have, over 100 people. I think around 200 people have already started to take the survey. And so if you're interested in doing this yourself and experiencing it and having yourself challenged to choose among your senses, and compared to these commodities, please use the QR code here. I also have the address posted below. And share with us what you think. You can type here in the chat or add something to the Q&A. And feel free to tweet with us your thoughts on the survey as well. We do hope to take this forward, but I do have a quick question for the 2 of you before we move into the next section of this web event. So here we are discussing the wonders of taste and smell. What do you see in the future as we are trying to promote awareness of our taste and smell and appreciation of taste and smell? What do you see in the future in, say, 10 years?
Well, I think that the sense of smell is going to enter daily life in a much more general and dramatic way moving forward. And I think that people will start to experience smell, in the world around them, in their virtual worlds as well. And so I hope that it becomes much more of an everyday realization of how important the sense of smell is. And also understanding, people who are into food and understanding how, taste versus smell and together flavor and sort of the food movement is really, probably in one of its highest periods, historically, at least in the West. And I feel like this is something that has momentum right now. So I hope that this just goes forward and also brings more awareness and realization to the importance of taste and smell.
Well, I really appreciate you being able to join us. And I'm going to move now into the next section of this web event. And if anybody is interested in contacting Doctors Herz and Braimah, please feel free to reach out to us and we can put you into contact. So feel free to visit the website. I would like now to take the opportunity to invite the panel discussion members to all come off mute and show your faces by starting your video. And have you join us to discuss your perspective, where you're coming from around this question of the wonders of taste and smell. So if everybody that is panelists could go ahead and come off mute and also share your video, and we'll go ahead and get started with that. So as everybody is joining us now, let's go ahead and start. I would like to start by brief introductions. So as we go around sort of this virtual room, I'm going to start with Mandy. If you could just briefly tell us what your expertise is. Also, if you could come off if you could have your video showing, I'd love to have you join us. But if you could give us a little bit of your background as well as
my video is stopped by you. I can't start it.
Oh, okay. Well,
the host turned it off.
Okay, I will get that fixed. But if you can go ahead and start your answer, I will get you going.
Okay. For over 25 years, I've been a perfumer, and I teach and write about natural. Oh, there I am. Hi. I teach and write about natural perfume. I have an artisanal line of perfumes made all from natural essences. I also have a line of chef's essences that are used for flavor by artisanal chocolate makers, ice cream makers, and so on, people using essential oil for flavor. And I wrote 2 cookbooks with a 2-star Michelin chef. I am driven completely by plant materials and attracted by the immeasurable beauty and happiness that fragrance and flavors from plants give to people. I love the essences and how they have been in our lives across the globe and across time in every culture, being used for spirituality, for food, for rituals, and for adornment. It's sort of what it is to be human. I created a museum of scent here in Berkeley, which is an odd statement to say, but it's true, where people can see and touch and smell plant materials and essences, where they can look at books on aromatics from the 16th century, as well as 100 books from 100 years ago, all about these miraculous things without being marketed to. Just have a real encounter with the materials that make us human. And I'm in the unique position of observing thousands of people who have come to my museum and watch them as they explore natural aromas, because I speak to everyone who comes. Many visitors are from the world of chocolate or winemaking or food. And I watch as people really encounter real smells and really enjoy them and are very, very happy, even in dark times in their life, when they have this experience with scent.
That's really amazing. Now, if you could describe briefly what you find so wondrous in particular about these senses.
I think that what's wondrous about them is that they're extremely easy to turn on to. They're very, very available, and they stop time. I think when you smell something, time stops and it makes you alive in your body. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's really, to me, what it is to be human. and to be alive. And so I think people have a shift in consciousness when they're really there and smelling things, and that there is no feeling of judgment. And so I think it's kind of pure pleasure.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to now move on to Jeanette. Jeanette, you're a totally different perspective as well. And so if you could describe how you are so involved in these senses, and also what you find so wondrous that attracted you to get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jeanette Andrews. I'm a magician and an artist based in New York City. And so I've been a magician now for nearly 28 years. It's going to be 28 years next month. And I have really always been taken with a lot of ideas in sensory perception in my work. And we typically think of magic as being a primarily visual form. And so the first time I did an artist residency, which was back, I believe, in 2014, I started to broaden how one might think about magic and illusions pertaining not only to vision, but to all 5 kind of primary senses. And in doing so, the one that I was just time and time again drawn to the most was smell. And I started to do a lot of deep dive in research and historical archives on magic, and was seeing that the number of times that magic had been done, performance, like traditional performance, stage, parlor, and close-up magic had been done using scent, I could count on one hand in the number, in the last like 500 years. And so then I was really drawn to try to figure out why that was, and then create my own. So I started working on, designing and creating pieces of close-up and parlor magic that would actually be creating magic using scent, which part of me doesn't want to say too much about, because if you ever see my performances, I don't want to give away the surprise too much.
I have seen it, and I do think it's really fun and amazing. I encourage you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Michelle. I know I see a couple other people in the viewers on this call who have seen me do things in person, which is quite different. But 2 things briefly is, obviously one of the reasons why historically that hasn't been done so much is, vision is in terms of magic a much more tightly controllable medium, as opposed to scent, which is typically, inherently airborne. And magic has a lot of very tight parameters of control around it. So that's kind of the reason why. So it's fun, it's been a really fun challenge for many years. And then in terms of sort of this type of work I've created, has been both performance pieces, and then things that then sort of broaden out from that, like installation and sculpture based work. I did a whole series on magic and scent called Bottling the Impossible in 2019, right before COVID, I created a series of impossible perfume bottles, where they were sculptures of glass bottles that had not been 3D printed or tampered with in any way, that had objects inside that were larger than the mouths of the perfume bottle. So solid objects like chess pieces and mirrors, like pocket mirrors, and then created scents to go along with them, that when sort of viewers smelled those scents, they were able to actually perform pieces of magic themselves that corresponded with the object or the scent at hand. So that's sort of a overview of the type of work that I've done. And then also the thing that I think also compelled me the most about why I find scent so wondrous is not only the lack of its presence in the history of sort of the magical canon, but is also the idea that it is inherently an invisible medium. And a lot of my work deals with invisibility. And so it does have this very, sort of unseen and mysterious quality that does, have this sort of, almost literally ethereal feel to it. So I think it's very ripe for a lot of magical tropes.
That is really interesting and amazing. Thank you so much. Now I would like to go on to Oghogho right now. So Dr. Braimah, if you could please speak to us about what it is, your perspective, where you're coming from as a ENT and neck surgeon. Tell us a little bit about that and what you find so wondrous about these senses.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm really happy to be here again with you. My background is in ENT, so attended medical school and then decided to specialize in ear, nose, and throat surgery. And as I started my residency training, we tend to come across people who have problems with 3 of the 5 senses. So smell, taste, and hearing. For hearing, we have this solid arsenal of tools that we can use to evaluate and treat patients. However, for smell, we have this really limited things that we can do. And for a vast subset of patients, there's absolutely nothing we can do at all. And I felt that's not right. You know, there's nothing we can do. So I thought to myself, how can I help? And in fact, with the few tools available for smell, many of them are not available in resource-limited settings. So that was another problem for me, coming from a low middle income country. And these are the things that started my interest in smell research. So currently my interest is in developing diagnostics for smell. And these diagnostics are ideally low cost, and that can capture, you know, just a wide variety of smell disorders that we have. And then in smell therapeutics, so there has to be something we can do. We can't just say to the patient, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. There has to be something we can do. So that's where my interest lies at the moment. And because of my interaction with the GCCR, the Global Consortium for Chemosensory Research, and some scientists from Monell, I'm able to make small progress in that direction. And I'm glad that things seem to be moving slowly but surely. And I hope that we should be able to provide help to all patients with smell disorders everywhere. When you ask, what do I find wondrous? That smell is really special to me. Because I lost my sense of smell very briefly for some time. I have allergic rhinitis, so allergy, sneezing, and my nose got blocked. And when that cleared up, I found I couldn't smell anything for weeks, and it was scary. I'm one of the lucky few who her sense of smell came back on its own after a couple of weeks, but I'm very aware that not many people are that lucky. And what I enjoyed so much about having it back is that connection with emotion and memory. The sense of smell has the ability to just transport you to another time and place. So when you taste this lovely chocolate fondue and you're like, oh, I had this when I traveled to Italy 2 months ago, and you literally can feel yourself back in Italy, in that place where you have the chocolate. And I think that's amazing, that ability to transport you to another time and place.
That is so true. That is, you know, sensory marketing and sensory travel. It's such a huge component. I really appreciate that perspective. And speaking of Monell, that brings us to Joel Mainland. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your connection to this topic, and also what you find so wondrous about taste and smell.
Sure. So I'm a neuroscientist at Monell, which is a nonprofit in Philadelphia that's devoted to the study of taste and smell. So I run a research group that looks primarily at smell, and we're currently really focused on trying to digitize odors. So if you have a smartphone, you can easily, you know, capture and send and reproduce sounds and images, but you can't do any of that for odors. And so in the field, it's hard for us to control odors, as people have mentioned, hard for us to work with them, hard for us to communicate about them. And so we're trying to figure out ways to sort of bring olfaction up to the level of control that we have for vision and audition. So, you know, that sort of ties into what I find really wondrous about studying smell. So there's just this huge variety of smells, this incredible diversity. And there's also this gigantic gap between what we understand about how we sense odors compared to vision and audition. And that really drew me in. So, you know, as Rachel said, right, typically as a neuroscientist, you're advised not to study smell, but also the problems are so fundamental in olfaction, right? So the problems that you can address are so fundamental that it's a very exciting area to do research in. There's so many open questions to go after. And so that really drew me in.
That's great. I think everybody's starting to see that we have a very varied panel here with all sorts of interesting different backgrounds. Given that, I'm going to move on to Dr. Barry Smith. If you can give us your perspective, where you're coming from with these senses. And again, what do you find so wondrous? What got you interested in this topic?
Thanks, Michelle. Well, I got interested in it in a strange kind of way. So I'm a philosopher. I was interested in perception and how the senses put us in touch with the world around us. And of course, a lot of philosophers who look at that are very vision dominated. They'll talk about, how we see trees and how we see objects, but they don't talk about smell and they don't talk about taste. And I was writing about wine in a sort of amateur way for the press. And then I thought, look, I'm prosing on to people about how wine tastes and the taste of this wine and that wine. How does taste actually work? So I started to talk to my colleagues in psychology and neuroscience, and then they said, oh, it's all very complicated. It's always taste, touch, and smell. They're always interacting. And I learned two things from my colleagues at that time. One, we've got way more senses than 5. Most of my neuroscience colleagues will say anywhere up to 22 or 33. And that the senses don't work independently of one another. It's not that we get smell and we get taste and we get hearing and we get vision and they're all happening in separate packets. No, they influence each other's working, and no more so than the case of eating, where we have taste and smell, touch as well, but collaborating to produce an experience that we call taste, and which is enormously dependent on smell. Tasting is always taste, touch, and smell, and the greatest of these is smell. So I started to be drawn into working with colleagues in neuroscience. We started a lab. We've got a dry lab and a wet lab, and I work with perfumers and I work with neurobiologists of olfaction. And the more you get drawn into it, and I'm sure everybody on this call will feel the same, the science is still elusive. We know a lot, but we don't know enough. And we're pursuing endlessly simple questions about how we go from the molecules that bombard us to how we perceive odors. And we despite Joel's latest attempts, we still know very little about how that's done. And that's mysterious because it's a very small and primitive sense, really, and so widespread in the animal kingdom. And then, like many other people on this call, working with a small community of sensory researchers during the pandemic, we all started to notice the reports of people's loss of smell. And they started coming from China and then Iran, then Germany, Italy, following the course of the pandemic. And then we realized, this is unmistakably something to do with SARS-CoV-2. And I started to work with Valentina Parma and people who had set up the Global Consortium for Chemosensory Research, and I was leading for the UK on that. And we worked with clinicians, patients, and their advocates. And we've continued to do so because it's far from over. And I've gone from working with people suffering from post-viral anosmia to now working with parosmia, especially distressing to people who find the tastes of coffee and onions, garlic, roasted meat, mint, eggs absolutely disgusting. And we're trying to find out exactly what the basis of that is. And we're working with food chemists and molecular scientists, but also tremendously influenced by patient reports. And then as a philosopher, finally, to say what I find fascinating, it's the fact that, smell is so unlike the other senses. We can smell round corners. We can't see round corners. This is an amazing thing. Mm-hmm. It's also part of making us feel immersed in the space we're in. So, if you think of it, your chemical senses are the gatekeepers of what's inner and outer, and they help to police that boundary. And in some sense, if you don't know where that boundary is, you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very much part of creating our sense of self. It's very intrinsically related to our sense of who we are and how we're situated in the world. And we notice with patients who've lost the sense of smell, profound psychological distress at feeling out of touch, as Stephanie said to begin with, out of touch with the world around them. People feel, I'm behind glass, I'm not connected. The world has faded a little. And it's only when we take sense of smell away, we realize how important it is. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. And so we should cherish it and pay more attention to it, I think.
Beautifully said. Now I want to end the introductions of this with my friend and colleague, Tian. If you could give us, how you got into this area, what you're doing currently, and what interested you in these senses.
Right. Thank you, Michelle. Yes. So I'm so happy to join this group discussion, and it's very happy to listen the senses from different perspectives. It's usually so I've come from the taste and smell like biology as well, but then I turned into a sensory and consumer scientist. So what sensory consumer scientists do, we help measure the product properties with human responses, measure them to help people respond, interpret it, and understanding human responses for the product properties before the products actually go into the market, right? So before we see all those food, beverages, consumer product goods, we need to test them and evaluate them before everybody can see them. So this is what sensory and consumer scientists do. And I specifically work for a tech company called Agora. Then we help sensory and consumer scientists to embrace technology or entering the new future world of artificial intelligence or Web3 metaverse. So that actually related to what I am finding this whole thing so interesting is that I appreciate everybody. I think within this group, everybody knows we how important taste and smell is, how like bad when we lost the senses like that. But then we are in this time that we're going into the future of like a virtual world. Believe it or not, we're now in a Zoom call and we are in a virtual world. So in going into the future, how do we embrace chemical senses and bring them along with us going into this virtual world? So this part is what I'm specifically interested in. Yeah,
I think that's a really good segue into the next portion I want to get into with this discussion is about the future. So when we're talking about digitalization or, how we are learning better to treat these, losses, whether it's from, some sort of virus or if it's, lost with age, what do you see? And I'm opening this up to everybody to start commenting on and discuss amongst the group. What do you see in the future? In 10 years from now, what would you like to see? What do you really think is going to happen as far as advances, even in products? I think it'd be really interesting to get everybody's perspective. Perhaps, Tian, you could start it off since you're kind of in this Web3 space. How does taste and smell play in Web3?
Right. So taste and smell can play in many ways. And I think it will be all of our effort because we are so interested in chemical sensing and taste and smell. We want to find a way to bring chemical senses to the virtual world as like Joe just said, like the digital scent, the digital olfaction, like those type of things could be one way to do it. If in future we have like a goggle that also have a little device that it can enable you to smell while you're interacting with others, that's definitely one way. More immediate future, it could be also like what Dr. Braimah said about how it's connecting to this the memories and you bring it to travel around the world without actually being there. So there's a connection between taste and smell with your vision and your auditory, your hearing, right? So all of these are connected, which we all agree here. So is there a way to kind of connect to that when we are in the virtual world, all of the other stimulations from olfaction, from vision, hearing, that could bring us to a space that also enable us to smell a little bit. So that's another direction that we can go. And of course, this technology in Web3 or metaverse, you heard about it, like NFT, all of those, they could carry, if we can find a way to carry some information, sensory information into those forms, like digital forms, they help you to interact with consumers a lot more like deeper than before. So it's a very open question. So I think this community is great and we can help all go into that direction together. Yeah.
Well, I would like to hear other thoughts. So what do other people think about when you think about where you are and what you've been doing in taste and smell, where you see things going in the future?
Yeah, so just to build on that, so I think, right now we have some devices that are trying to deliver odors to you, virtually. So there are devices you can snap onto your VR headset that deliver odors to you. But most of those are really loaded with sort of a limited number of smells that have been specifically composed for that device. And so these we think of as closer to like a slide projector than a television, right? You're capturing some specific image and projecting it out to people, but you're not actually recreating everything, right? And so, in vision, the reason we can do this is that we know what the primary colors are. We know that if you mix red paint and blue paint, you get purple paint. We know that with just 3 basic colors in an RGB monitor, you can make lots and lots of different colors out of those components. And the field is starting to figure some of this out for olfaction. So there's already some models in olfaction that have started to look at this and find sets of primary odors that can make different gamuts of odors for people to look at. But we're definitely at the sort of, at best, like 8-bit graphic stage where people can do this and you can get sort of close to something, but you're not really reproducing a deep experience at that point. So it seems that most of the barriers to that are primarily like engineering and technical as opposed to theoretical at this point. Although as we try to develop things, we may run into more theoretical problems later on. But currently it looks like that's the kind of thing we can do. Yeah.
That kind of gets to one of the questions someone asked in the Q&A, which was, so we have cochlear implants, right? Is there a possibility of anything like that for people who do lose their taste or smell when you're talking about these digitized, when we're talking about ligands, all these sort of things, when we're starting to understand more about the way the neuroscience of these senses work, is there a possibility of something like that in the future?
Yeah, my take on it is that it's going to be more than 10 years, right? So I think that the cochlear implants, first of all, the cochlear implants, I think people were surprised at how well they worked. So they didn't have to have a complete understanding of how the auditory system was encoding everything to be able to make a device that sort of did better than they expected. In addition, sort of like you have to do a sort of basic set of research of understanding how the stimulation pattern is going to be interpreted by the system, which we're still very far away from, particularly in humans, before you can sort of start to move into humans and do clinical trials. And so I think we still have quite an on-ramp before we can get to actually creating the equivalent of a cochlear implant for olfaction. But I think 10 years is kind of maybe too short, but 20 years is probably quite reasonable.
So I would beg to disagree. I know 2 groups that are already, one working on basically the olfactory version of a cochlear implant and even working with patients, as well as another group that's also working on sort of peripheral manipulations on a sort of a drug-like basis to boost the gain of the olfactory receptors that are still available for people who have dramatic loss. Now, it depends on the cause of the loss and how these methods can be helpful, but my interpretation of what's currently happening is I'd say 5 years, maybe even less, my optimistic view.
That's
For
great.
something
Barry,
anyway.
You were wanting to chime in on the future as well.
Yeah, I want to express a note of skepticism. I mean, I take what Rachel said, that's about the biology. Joel's really talking in previous terms about trying to match descriptions of molecules to what people report as smells, leaving the biology out. You're going to have an artificial cochlear-like implant device. You need the biology. So Rachel's right. We'll have to work on the peripheral system and the further pathways. But here's the thing I think we can't do, and I just want to express a note of caution. I'm sure Tian has this caution, but a lot of our lives are digitized. There's lots of things we can digitize, but I think it's a symptom of our lack of attention to smell that we still think, oh, in the future we'll digitize our whole lives. We'll have recordings of us and they'll all be audiovisual. And guess what? They'll have left out taste and smell. And when we talk about digitizing smell, there's a lot of hype and nonsense behind that. I mean, you can talk about in virtual reality creating a virtual version of a 3D world around you, which is not an actual environment around you, but there is no equivalent in smell. You can talk about having devices that deliver smells to you, but they're going to put real molecules up real noses interacting with our biology or any supplement to it to produce the experience. So we mustn't get carried away with the idea that there's some digitized metaverse in which we're going to have smell in there. When Mark Zuckerberg talks about having our meetings in the metaverse, Where's the coffee? Where's the biscuits? Those are going in real mouths and under real noses, otherwise not at all. So I think we have to be very cautious not to let our audiovisual friends who've been super successful sort of bluff us into thinking we can just add the chemical senses afterwards. Not sure we can.
Given that perspective, which I think is really interesting, I'd like to pass this off to Mandy, because having a historical expertise in this, I would love to hear your thoughts on the future.
Well, I'm glad I'm going after Barry because he's brought it back to where I am, which is, I think COVID, and many people came to my museum who were suffering from COVID. It was a very interesting time to be involved in smell. I think that there's so much interest from the consumer, from just regular people, in smell in their lives. And there's a very wonderful book came out last year from Harold McGee called Nosedive that really took about the molecules in outer space and perfume and food. Brilliant food scientist and very interested in smell. And it was a landmark book in terms of explaining all about aroma beyond perfume to people. So I feel there's a real hunger and interest for real education for people to make a more meaningful connection to their sense of smell, and the great interest in forest bathing and being in nature and actually turning your devices off. I feel like the realness of that is so important, and also so connects us to who we are throughout time, that it gives us something that's immeasurable. It's sort of maybe the magic that Jeanette was talking about. I was fascinated by. I think we need more magic. I think that's a very important part of life and always has been.
I totally agree. And I think that that's a perfect segue into asking Jeanette what she thinks will happen in the future.
Well, I feel a bit of the odd one out in this, in that I'm not, not a chemosensory scientist, but so I can't speak to, the future in terms of what's going on in research or technology, but I really second what Barry said. Coming at it from my own look at, sort of the deep psychology of what happens when groups of people experience scent. That is a very, again, looking at this from like the phenomenology of how we experience scent, that is a very lived experience. And, so trying to, have that sort of metaverse digitization, again, I think one could imagine, if you are experiencing something in a way, you can sort of have the impression that maybe you're smelling coffee. You could sort of have the illusion that you're smelling coffee. Are you really? Are you actually having that chemical input? No. So and then, on the flip side of the work that I do, it's sort of the opposite, where people, it's sort of a magical creation of something that then is real, where people really are smelling it. So do I, in terms of, the future in terms of tech, I do think it's, really almost more of an interesting, psychological and philosophical inquiry. That's, certainly how I view it.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective too. And there is an interest in seeing, how we can connect with people, right? And how that can be utilized more in how we can trigger different memories and things of that sort. Now I want to lean into Oghogho on when it comes to treatment, or what you see in the future, when we're talking about, raising the appreciation and the awareness of these issues. What do you see in the future?
I think that with COVID and all that's come after it, a lot of scientists have developed interest in smell. I do think we're already seeing, and we will continue to see, explosion of knowledge in this area, which is good for many of us. And in particular, when it comes to therapies, I think that we could possibly see more of a breakthrough in the area of regenerative medicine. So for patients who the damage is at the olfactory epithelium right there in the nose, I think that regenerative medicine and stem cell research holds some answers. We can just help that epithelium grow back, if that's the level at which the damage is. then we can help these patients. So I think that yes, in 10 years that can happen. And for patients who have injuries in the brain, so from head injury and all that, it will be a bit more complex. And that's where the cochlear implant for smell, it would be very helpful in terms of just the higher centers. But I do think that we will make remarkable research in terms of treatment, and I'm excited for that.
That is great. And it does sound like there is a lot of excitement for the future and raising this awareness. I want to thank our panelists for having, being able to join us in this this appreciation and this discussion, and raise awareness through this day. This is our second annual. We're going to continue to do this event, World Taste and Smell Day, and it's so great to have you be part of this and everybody joining us. Now, as we transition into the next portion, I would like to bring Stephanie back on to talk about what we're doing for taste and smell, to raise that awareness and to promote the appreciation. So in addition to things like running this survey, we would really like to also invite everybody to participate and talk about our sponsors and what we're doing for this day, and we'll continue to do as we move on into the future. So Stephanie, if you could rejoin us to talk a bit about that.
So thank you. This was fabulous, and it got my wheels turning in a big way, and I really hope it did for everyone else who's participating today. In New York City, we have a live event tonight that features pairings of perfume and cocktails, and one of the cocktails that was created by Safumatu Fragrances in Detroit is called the Pale Shadow. It's kind of like a daiquiri, but it's scentless, so that when you experience it, you will have that just a brief moment of a sense of what it's like to not be able to smell when you expect that your world will smell a certain way. In Detroit at Castillo Cocktails, they will be serving that tonight at happy hour. Request it if you're in the area. And you can also stop by today. The Art and Olfaction Institute is having an open session on the mixing of perfume. In China, we have events, and in Philippines as well, that really involve patients and medical professionals there on site, talking about taste and smell training, and providing some testing as well. And then there are just personal ways that you could think about getting involved, which is really to take a moment to talk to somebody that you know who has lost their sense of taste and smell, and hear what it's like, because you don't really know until you hear about it, and offer some sympathy and empathy. And I would love to say that there were a trillion things going on this year. There will be, with all of your help, because I think that this is, there's a tremendous interest. COVID really sparked our awareness in taste and smell in a way that we didn't have it before. And we are dedicated to keeping that going. And we really want to partner with organizations and individuals throughout the world. So I would really request that you go to our website, which is tasteandsmell.world, and sign up to, we say, join our movement. And we really do feel it is a movement. But if you would sign up so that we keep in touch with you to let you know all the things that are going on. And, if you're able to, please donate, because we have a tremendous number of programs that we would like to get off the ground. So that would be helpful. We do, again, want to thank our sponsors. Takasago International has been with us from the beginning, and it has just been terrific to have their support, because it's helped us bring some of this to you. And, I really have to thank the panelists, because you really put a lot of thought into what you were sharing, and it really opened our eyes about taste and smell. Again, the website, if we can, is tasteandsmell.world. It would be great if people would tweet to share with us, and it is, we're using Taste and Smell Day as our hashtag, so please do share. And take the survey, because we want to know what people's perceptions of taste and smell really are.
Yes, again, thank you so much, everybody who has joined us. We did a recording of this presentation, and we will be sharing it on our socials and on YouTube. If you have any additional questions that you have for any of our panelists, please feel free to reach out to us via our website or on Twitter, and we will definitely convey your questions to the panel, comments, questions, all of those things. So thank you so much. Go out today and experience your taste and smell, pass it on, do everything you can to join us in the movement. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day, evening, morning, wherever it is that you are. Thank you. And thank you to the panelists once again. Bye, everybody.
Right, thank you, Michelle.